Man, this just sucks. This is just sad outright, man. I originally wasn't going to do a video on this, but I've been sleeping like shit for the past 2 days. So it's clearly affecting me more than I'd like to admit. So I want to just get all of this kind of off of my chest. I haven't really planned anything in this video or anything like that. It's more of me just praising the guy for all the things that he's done throughout the years and just giving him credit where it's due for shaping tens of millions of lives throughout our childhood, mine included. So if you haven't heard for some reason, sadly, Akira Toriyama, the creator of Dragon Ball and everything related to Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball Z, Super, GT, it was announced day before yesterday that he passed away at the age of 68, which is crazy young for someone in his position. It's young, period, for someone to pass away under any circumstances. But it's originally I was, like I said, not going to do a video about this because I was going to try and just mourn, accept it, deal with it on my own time, and then kind of move on, as I'm sure many people are doing. But like I said, for the past 2 nights, I haven't really been able to sleep, so it's clearly affecting me more than I thought. And that's the thing, is that throughout my life, being as much of a fan of metal as I am, there have been many really big musicians that I've very much looked up to and idolized pass away for a myriad of reasons, like the Rev from Avenged Sevenfold, Joey Jordison, and Paul Gray from Slipknot, Wayne Static from Static X, and tons of others. And the thing is that when they all passed away, I had a similar reaction to all of them. I was like, oh my god, that sucks. I was like, holy shit, these people created music that I have grown up with, and now they're gone, and I'll never be able to see them live or meet them or interact with them or anything like that. But I handled it a lot better. And to me, I think that's because the difference here is that with Akira Toriyama and his works with Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball Z, Super, and GT, primarily Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, that for me and tens of millions of other people around my age and older and younger, it really did encompass a vast majority of our childhoods and early teen years, late teen years, hell, even to this day. Still his work persists in the lives of people like myself and others. He created something that transcended cultural boundaries, financial boundaries, like racial boundaries, ethnic boundaries, to where anyone and everyone from any part of the world could enjoy what he did. And we did. And it became this huge cultural, or more specifically, just a worldwide phenomenon where it didn't matter who you were or where you were from or how rich or poor you were. Like, you knew the characters in Dragon Ball. You knew Goku. You knew Bulma. You knew Vegeta. You knew Piccolo. You know, it's like all of these characters are so entrenched and ingratiated into the vast majority of our lives that hearing that he's gone now is so mind boggling. And it's just sad. It's just outright sad. And I think that's partially why I've not been dealing with it as good as I thought I would. So I just kind of need to get all of this out and, praise him for the amazing person that he was, you know. And I found out, oddly enough, through Charlie's stream night before last, like 10 minutes after like New York Times had announced it and the Dragon Ball official Twitter had announced it. Like this was minutes after the announcement was made. And it floored me. And it's just one of those really sad things because myself and so many others around me growing up, who were into Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z around the time I was growing up, it was Dragon Ball Z. But most of us all started with Dragon Ball, you know. Back then it was one of those things where you couldn't really comfortably go around talking about it to other people because you would likely get made fun of for being a fan of anime and you just get called a nerd. And nowadays, 25, almost 30 years later, it's come completely full circle to where now it's the opposite. You're considered weird if you aren't into some kind of anime or if you haven't heard or are into Dragon Ball or Dragon Ball Z. So and that shows just how much influence he had and his work had on my entire generation. And like I said, not just my entire generation, but the generations that came before me and after me. And so you really have to give credit and respect where it's due. And the thing is that I after I started looking into it, you know, I found out that he died from what was an acute subdural hematoma, which is a condition in which blood collects between the skull and the brain. And I've seen conflicting reports from both this and the Dragon Ball official Twitter that originally announced it, saying that it was a blood clot in his head versus blood actually pooling in the brain. But either way, that's it. They both have stated that it was an acute subdural hematoma, which is a horrible way to die. And from what I read, the mortality rate is extremely high on these types of things, which is terrifying. To anywhere between 50% to 80% mortality rate, which again is terrifying. And it's just one of those things that 68 is so young for someone to pass away for any reason, but if you can't tell, like I said before, I haven't really planned this video. I've tried to kind of figure out how I want to approach it, but there's no good way to approach something like this. There's no real elegant way to approach something like this rather than to just give your best thoughts and your best wishes to the afflicted in this scenario. And that's really all I'm going to try and do. And just like I said at the beginning, praise Akira for all the good that he did, because you could very easily equate him to being the Bob Ross of the anime world. He never did anything wrong to anybody. There was never any um like horrible accusations made against him. Everyone who ever did get to meet him or interview him or be around him, period, only ever had glowing things to say about him. That he was just an absolute sweetheart and one of the coolest people to be around. And furthermore, he very directly inspired some of the world's now biggest anime that exists. Like, were it not for Toriyama, this like these anime that we know of would not exist, period. Like, for example, here, like Tite Kubo, who is the creator of Bleach, sent his regards on the whole situation, saying, "It would be strange to write a diary without mentioning this, so I'll just talk about something serious. Personally, I don't feel any loneliness or pain. I'm not saying there aren't any at all, but there aren't as many as I thought. It's the death of someone I've read since I was a child, someone who works in the same magazine as me, and someone I'm deeply influenced by. So it feels different than when I deal with death in general. That's why I feel like it doesn't exist. I've never really talked about this to anyone, but I've always believed that creating things means expanding your sensibilities and expanding your life. This is because I believe that as long as the work exists, the author is not dead. And I believe that being able to properly get used to this feeling is proof of the magnitude of the work's existence that remains in my heart. That's all. From the next post, I will continue with my usual enthusiasm." And that was from the creator of Bleach. Furthermore, Masashi Kishimoto, the creator of Naruto, also sent his regards and thoughts on the situation. Says, "Honestly, I don't know what to write or how to write about something so sudden. However, for now, I would like to express my thoughts and feelings to Toriyama Sensei, something I wish he would have asked me someday. I grew up with Dr. Slump in the lower grades of elementary school and Dragon Ball in the upper grades, and it was natural for me to have his manga next to me as part of my life. Even if I had a bad experience, watching Dragon Ball every week made me forget about it. It was a relief for me, a country boy who had nothing." I can 100% relate to that, because Dragon Ball was really fun. It was when I was a university student, suddenly the Dragon Ball that had been a part of my life for so many years ended. I felt an incredible sense of loss and didn't know what to look forward to, but at the same time, it was also an opportunity for me to truly understand the greatness of the teacher who created Dragon Ball. I also want to create works like yours." Man, this is actually making me choke up. "I want to be like my teacher. As I followed in my teacher's footsteps and aspired to become a manga artist, that feeling of loss began to disappear, because making comics was fun. I was able to find new fun by following my teacher. My teacher has always been my guide. I admired it. I apologize for the inconvenience, but I would like to express my gratitude to the teacher. For me, he was the god of salvation and the god of manga. When we met for the first time, I was so nervous that I couldn't say a word. However, after meeting him many times at the Tezuka Prize screening committee, we became able to talk. As Dragon Ball children, I and Mr. Oda, who is the creator of One Piece, went back to being children again. And when we talked excitedly about how much Dragon Ball was fun, as if we were competing with each other, I forgot how he looked a little embarrassed and smiled at me. I can't. I have just received the news of the death of my teacher. I feel an even greater sense of loss than when Dragon Ball ended. I still don't know how to deal with this hole in my heart. Now I can't even read my favorite Dragon Ball. I don't feel like I've been able to properly write this sentence that I want to convey to my teacher. Everyone around the world was still looking forward to seeing your work. If Dragon Ball's one wish really comes true, I'm sorry. Maybe that's selfish, but it's sad, Sensei. Thank you, Akira Toriyama Sensei, for all of your enjoyable works over the past 45 years, and thank you very much for your hard work. We are sure that the remaining family members are still deeply hurt. Please take care of yourself. I pray that Mr. Akira Toriyama rests in peace. And lastly, from Ichiro Oda, the creator of One Piece, says, "It's too early. The hole is too big. The thought of never seeing you again fills me with sadness. I've admired you so much since I was a child, and I even remember the day when you called me by name for the first time. I also miss the day when I had a great time with Mr. Kishimoto on the way home from the day when he used the word friend for us. I also remember the last conversation we had. He is one of the people who took the baton from the era when reading manga would make you stupid and created an era where both adults and children read and enjoy manga. He showed us the dream that manga can do things like this and that we can go to the world. He gave it to me. It was like watching a hero push forward. The excitement he experienced when he serialized Dragon Ball is probably rooted in the childhoods of creators who are active in all industries, not just manga artists. That existence is a great tree. From manga artists of my generation who have stood on the same stage, the closer I got to Toriyama's works, the more I realized that they had a greater presence. It's so scary. But I'm just happy to see the easygoing man himself again, because we love Toriyama Sensei on a blood level. I would like to express my respect and gratitude to the world of creativity left behind by Professor Toriyama, and pray for his repose in peace. I hope that heaven will be a pleasant world just as you envisioned it." Man, that shit's sad. Like, goddamn. Like, three of the biggest anime and manga artists on earth showing their love and respect and admiration for Akira Toriyama. That's just outright sad and amazing and beautiful, by the way. It's like, God. But here's the thing, too, is that I wasn't joking when I said that his works extended beyond class and ethnicity and cultures. It subverted all of these things. So much so to where in Mexico there were government-sponsored public watch parties for the final episodes of Dragon Ball Super, and they became so popular, Japan had to send a formal diplomatic notice commanding them to stop, which of course they didn't. Dude, could you imagine? Just thousands of people all getting together. Dude. That shit's so cool. Like, because from everything I've ever seen and heard and read, clearly, and this substantiates it, Dragon Ball is like a fucking religion in Mexico and in Latin America. Like, they take this shit so very seriously. So I imagine, like, of all of all other non-Japanese countries, for how they're processing Akira Toriyama's death, I'm willing to bet that the Latin American countries and Mexico are probably hit the hardest. Like, they are effectively mourning the death of a god. It makes sense because he, like I said before, he's so ingratiated. All of his works have been so ingratiated into our lives for the past 45 years, way before I was born, but especially since I was growing up, like as a kid, like in the mid 90s when Dragon Ball first started airing, like around, I think it was 95 or 96 when Dragon Ball first started to air in America. Like from that point forward, everyone was into it. And like, holy shit, the dude created a phenomenon, a not just a cultural phenomenon, but like a worldwide generational, multi-generational phenomenon that I haven't seen. Like, you could draw comparisons to Pokemon because Pokemon blew up in a freakishly extreme way, but whenever people think about Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z and anything Dragon Ball related, they think of Akira Toriyama. Like, I've never really heard the same thing said about Pokemon. Like, people love Pokemon 100%, but you don't really hear them mentioning like the creator of Pokemon as like the GOAT. You know what I mean? The same way that people do with Toriyama. And it just goes to show you like how much of an influence he had over the world without even really intending to. He in one of the few interviews he ever did back in, I think it was 2013, he mentioned that all he ever wanted was for his works to just be entertaining to as many people as possible, for as many people possible to enjoy his works, and he 100% accomplished that goal, you know? And it's just sad to see such an amazing figure gone so soon, you know, because the pain will eventually subside, but the loss is permanent, you know, and that's what's so sad about it. On a slightly more positive note, I do know that he has already, well before he died, he had already kind of passed on his works and kind of passed the torch, if you will, to, I think it was his son. I could be mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong. But it, effectively his protege, so that uh, his upcoming works and future works will continue. Like, I think the one that he was working on before he died was Dragon Ball Daimyo, which was everything kind of returning to its original roots. Dragon Ball returning to its original roots, where Goku's a kid again. Um, so that will still be happening, and Super apparently is still going to be continuing. So there is that to look forward to, but I'm just curious as to how it's really going to play out now that he is gone, because I know that even though he had kind of passed the torch, he still oversaw a lot of these things, to, if for bare minimum, for like quality control and making sure that everything was as it should be. And now that he's gone, that's not going to be there. So I am curious to kind of see how these things play out in the coming years. But regardless, it's still very sad to have someone so influential in so many of our lives to be gone now. And as I said at the beginning, I haven't planned this video in any way, shape, or form, if that's not obvious. So I don't really know how to end a video like this, because I don't want to end it on like a really morose, sad note. If anything, remember the best facets of everything that Toriyama was able to give us while he was alive in across these past 45 years. Like everything he's ever done, remember those and hold them dear to your heart, because I sure will be. And I know that I'm not the only one. So, this was just something that I kind of wanted to get off my chest and talk about for a little bit. Maybe give myself some kind of weird form of closure and peace of mind. And forgive me if that sounds selfish, but as I said before, I was originally not going to do a video on this and kind of try and just uh, deal with it and cope with the loss on my own time, but clearly that wasn't working. So I just needed to talk about it some. Just remember the best in Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball Z, GT, Super, everything else that he's ever done, because he worked on a ton of stuff, a ton of really good stuff that was all just him. And everything that I've ever heard about him was just nothing but positivity. It was just pure warm heartedness, glowing beauty, if you will, from anyone and everyone who had ever gotten to interact with him, which says a lot. It really does say a lot, especially nowadays. You don't get that. For someone to be able to be compared to the Bob Ross of anything is a huge compliment and a huge statement. And you don't hear it a lot nowadays. And so for that to be the case with Toriyama, it says a lot about the kind of person that he was. But at any rate, hope you're all doing well. Take care of yourselves. I'll see you next time. Peace.